Welcome to today's Friday Focus. Today is Friday, July 11th. I'm your host, Jessica Steinberg, with my guest, former hostage, Keith Siegel. Hi, Keith. Good to have you here with me.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
Keith was born in the United States and moved to Israel more than 40 years ago and was taken hostage from his home in Kibbutz Kfar Aza during the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack, along with his wife, Aviva Siegel. While she was freed in November 2023, he was not released until very recently in February 2025 during the last ceasefire and hostage release deal. And now Keith Siegel has remained an extremely steady, dedicated voice in the struggle to release the remaining 50 hostages, some of whom he knows very personally, both from captivity and from his home in Kibbutz Kfar Aza. So that is the intro that I'm giving to you, Keith, as we are in this very intensive week with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington and this push for a hopeful final ceasefire.
Thank you, and I'm grateful for you inviting me to participate and to have this opportunity to tell people and to try to, as best as I can, express the urgency for getting all of the 50 hostages back.
Yeah. So, Keith, I been following you, of course, for a very long time, unbelievably, nearly 2 years at this point, and I was really struck by something that was said. You were in the Knesset earlier this week, and we're recording this on Wednesday evening, Israel time, and you were in the Knesset with Lishai Miran Lavi and a few other hostage family members. She is the wife of Omri Miran, and you were held with Omri for a while, but a year ago. And she was saying that you were the last person to see him in July, and that it has been a full year since you last saw him. And she was saying, and this is a quote, "I look at Keith and I want him to finally rest. Every person who came back deserves a chance to start healing. And yet they wake up every morning when we can barely stand and speak out for us and for our children. Omri, Lishai's husband, is still there. Keith was the last person to see him." So I wanted to really start with this thought that I have every time I see you and hear you is, how are you doing and how are you doing this? Because we know that you still need to heal and to rehabilitate. And I know that you and other former hostages say, yes, I need to heal, but I can't do it until the others come home. And it's this juxtaposition. It's this impossible reality that you're living in still, in a sense.
Yes, I feel as if I am still together with Omri, and I'm still together with Matan Angrist, who I also spent time with in captivity, an extended period of time. And also Gali Berman and Ziv Berman, twin brothers from my kibbutz from Kfar Aza, and I have known them since they were born. So I spent time in captivity with each of them, and extended periods of time, and obviously the two of us, because when we were together it was just the two of us hostages. Obviously, in a very challenging reality, and supporting each other to get through each day. And I feel so very close to each of them and to their families. I actually feel like we're together in this, and I don't think I have an option to not do whatever I can do to help get them back. And I feel the same about all of the 50 hostages, even those that I did not spend time with. I know what I experienced, and I know what I experienced, and I know the horrific things that I experienced, and I saw other hostages experiencing. So I know the urgency of getting them back, and I think we all know that they are in a life-threatening situation, the ones that are still alive, and I think we all know that we could lose the deceased, and we must get all of the 50 back, and we need to save them. We need to literally save them. Save the ones that are alive, save the deceased, so we can do what our religion is so important, is considered to be the thing that must be done: save lives and bring deceased back to a proper burial.
Right. I just want to clarify Matan Angris for our listeners, just to remind them that he is a soldier who was taken hostage and has been severely injured. And I believe that his mother, Anat Angris, was also at the Knesset earlier this week with you.
Yes, it's correct. And Gali and Ziv Berman's,
Right. And Galen Ziv Berman, of course.
her their aunt, their mother's sister, Maccabit, was also there.
Right, who has been also a very visible protester and image in for the entirety of this period. When you were in the Knesset earlier this week, Keith, you gave very harrowing new testimony from your time in Hamas captivity. You spoke about witnessing severe violence and abuse of a female hostage that you were held with. And I wondered, the decision to talk about new testimony, to share that, I imagine was in order to shake the Knesset committee meeting that you were in, and to push to offer, in a sense, new information that really pushes this news all the time. Correct? Was that your reasoning? Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I try to convey and well, I try to express in as vivid as possible, and in as vivid way as possible that I can, and I always feel like I can't really convey the horrific things that I experienced, and specifically the horrific things that I witnessed, because I witnessed things that I spoke about the woman that was being tortured. Literally, she was being beaten, and she was being threatened and beaten, and a metal rod that was being that a pointed red metal rod that one of the terrorists was holding on to, standing behind her, had put it on her forehead and was applying pressure to her forehead with this metal rod with a sharp point at the end of it. They had covered her mouth so that she couldn't talk, and there were three terrorists in the room taking turns beating her, and the one that was as I described before, with the metal rod. And they called me into the room and they told me that I must tell her to confess. They were accusing her of something that was not true. They said that she had a position in the IDF, and this was not true, and that I must tell her that if she does not confess and if she does not tell them and answer their questions, that they will continue this torture. And it was something that, when I say torture, it was in as much literal way as a little literally torture. And afterwards, they also I don't remember if it was before or after, but I definitely remember 100% as vivid, and I don't think I will ever be able to forget what I saw. And they had put one of them was holding a loaded pistol, and he pressed the pistol to. They told her she must go down on her knees, and then he put the pistol, I guess the end of the pistol where the bullet comes out of, to her head. Again, I'm trying to describe this as accurately as possible, and said that if she does not confess, he's going to kill her. And this was right in front of my eyes. And I was just, I don't know. I mean, thinking about that and talking about that as time goes by, I feel like it's more and more difficult for me to deal with the fact that I was in this situation and I was not able to stop it. I don't know if I was able or if I could have, or but the fact that I did not stop this is something that's very, very difficult for me to deal with. And I just did what they told me to do, and I was,
Of course. Of course. What else could you do?
yeah. I mean, I could have done something. I don't know what the result would have been. Anyway, so. So I saw that, and I know that Matan was held in a tunnel where he could hardly breathe in, and Matan suffers from asthma and from breathing difficulties, and just to save his life, in order to have him alive, so that they could bargain with him being a bargain chip to get prisoners released. They took him out of the tunnel, and Matan was severely burned, and he didn't receive the medical attention that he needed and needs up until this day. Suffered extreme pain. And I know also Omri and Gali and Ziv were injured, they were tortured, they were abused. And, people that have heard testimonies about starvation and about dehydration. And I know we were held in a tunnel where we could barely breathe, and we were left alone there for extended periods of time. My wife Aviva was sick, and they didn't bring her medication. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about the horrific conditions.
I want to ask you something along these lines, but sort of in a different angle a little bit. You spend a lot of time, of course, with the families of hostages who are still in Gaza. Some people who you knew beforehand, some people who you did not. I'm presuming you didn't know Omri Miran's wife. Obviously, you know the Berman's family. You didn't know Matan Angrist's family. Is there any comfort that they get from you having been released, returned, very present in their lives? There's all the horrible, terrible pieces of information like you just shared. Is there anything that you feel that you're able to give them that is comforting?
When I was released, it was I felt the urgency to contact the families of the hostages that I was with in captivity, to tell them that I was with them, and to tell them, to describe to them about our experience together. I was trying hard to calm them and to reassure them as much as I could. So I did that, but it also meant not telling them the whole story about horrendous things that we experienced. Because, as I said before, we supported each other and we had a lot of interactions with each other. And even in the situation we were in, we had times of, you know, happiness within this, if I could call it that.
Hmm.
I think brief. Yeah, I mean, we had in this abnormal situation and in this life-threatening situation, we were able to talk about mutual interests, which we all had, and our love of music and what artists, musicians we like, and talked a lot about our families and food and all sorts of and I think to survive and also to get by day by day to get through the days. So I mean, there were times where we could do that. There were times where we could not, because some of the times we were not allowed to talk. And I spent 6 months alone. I was you mentioned I was in captivity for 484 days. Out of that, I was alone for 6 months total. It was broken up into three periods of time. But and when I say alone, I was the only hostage. So some of the time I was locked by myself in a room. Some of the time I was together with the terrorists. But so yes, getting back to your question, I think I was trying to comfort them and to reassure them that their loved ones, Matan, Omri, Gali, and Ziv, are okay. Together with that, it had been a long time had passed since we were separated. I hadn't seen Ziv Berman, who was the last hostage that I was held with. I hadn't seen him for months. So this was all based on, and Omri and Matan, even longer time. So, but I was trying hard to talk about positive things or experience, but it meant again, not telling them things that I think is important, especially for the public to know. And those are very, very hard things for me to talk about, and especially hard for me to tell the hostage families of hostages that are still there and are still experiencing these things. So it's a dilemma. On the one hand, to convey the urgency of releasing all of them because of the horrific, life-threatening situation they're in. On the other hand, I am in contact with families, and I've done interviews together with hostage families. And you mentioned yesterday we were in the Knesset in the Israeli parliament together, and I testified there. And it's very, very difficult. But I am just hoping that Prime Minister Netanyahu and our government, through what I have talked about, will understand the urgency and do what needs to be done to bring all of the hostages back and do it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Keith, you've made a good number of trips to the US to, the place that you came from. Since in the short time since you've been released, in order to push this message, we are in a it feels like a week in which possibly something could happen, possibly nothing could happen. I'm wondering, and you're someone who has met with President Trump. What are your thoughts in this particular week as we all read the headlines that are coming out of Washington, D.C., that are coming from the White House?
Lots of hope, trying to be as optimistic as I can, calling upon President Trump and his administration, primarily President Trump, calling upon Prime Minister Netanyahu to make an agreement happen and make it happen as soon as possible. And I mean, when I say as soon as possible, I would like to say now. It's a figure of speech, maybe, but I really feel like every moment that passes when the hostages are still there, suffering in life-threatening situation. And I want to stress the fact that the deceased, or I don't want to compare, but I just want to say all of the 50 hostages need to be released. And I urge them to reach an agreement that will return all of the 50 hostages together, and not that this will go on and decide who's going to come back and who's going to stay there and risk continued risk of losing lives and losing the deceased. So I am hopeful and I am optimistic, but I also recall the devastation and captivity of hearing about negotiations that seemed like they were heading in a good direction, and it seemed like we might be released soon. And the negotiations failed, and we were back in the situation of no negotiations, and who knows when or if we'll ever be released. So I think about Matan, and I think about Omri and Gali and Zivi, and I think about all of the hostages, and I think about all of the hostages' families, what they're going through, and the stress. I mean, on the one hand, you know, I just hope so much that we're on the verge of an agreement that will bring them all home. But I am also worried that it could not happen, and I'm worried about an agreement that will be having to decide who's going to come back and who's not. And
Right, right. The big that big question right now. Yeah. Keith, you would hear about negotiations while you were in captivity. You were aware of them more than once?
sometimes I did, and sometimes I did not.
Mm-hmm.
I was relocated 33 times throughout my time in captivity, and depending on where I was being held, sometimes there was a TV, and sometimes they would let us watch the TV or a radio, but there were lots of times when nothing. And actually, my last 2 weeks in captivity, I had no idea what was happening. I knew there was a ceasefire on the 19th of January, they told me. And but I only knew 2 days before I was released that I was going to be released. I wasn't sure that was actually going to happen until I was,
And you were alone at that time.
yeah, my last 2 months, the last 2 months in captivity, I was alone. And the last 2 weeks, I was locked up in a room alone. And as I said, I was not able, they did not allow me to watch TV. So I didn't know. It's very important for me to mention soldiers and everybody involved in security, soldiers and the Shin Bet and everyone that have been working so hard for so long and risking their lives. And they did succeed in bringing some of the hostages home and risking their lives, and some of them lost their lives doing that. And I am so appreciative and grateful to them. And I also want to express I want to recognize the deceased soldiers' families and trying to just saying how sorry I am for their loss and how much I appreciate what their loved ones did for me and did for the security of the country and all of their contribution to our security and to make sure something like October the 7th will not happen again. And I also want to thank so much, just so many people in Israel that have been so supportive and have done so much since October the 7th, the efforts to get the hostages back. And it's amazing. We never imagined or knew what was happening. And not only in Israel, in the United States. And as you said, we've been to the United States a few times, and I walk in the streets in Washington and in New York, and people come up to me and they recognize me and they tell me, we know you, you don't know us, but it's very, very supportive and it gives me a lot of strength to continue in my mission.
I want to ask you one more personal question as we get close to the end of the podcast, and that is you as a father, grandfather, husband. I know that earlier today, you were playing with one of your grandchildren, and I know that that is a very important part of your life, and thank goodness that is something that you've been able to return to. When you think ahead to hostages home, war over, who will Keith Siegel be? What do you want to do with yourself and with your life once we hopefully get to the end of this?
Yes. In the general, I can speak generally about my desire to help people, and maybe I feel so close and connected to hostages and hostage families. I don't know if I will have the opportunity to. I'm sure I will, not as a job, but
As a
yeah,
volunteer, as an
yeah.
activist.
Any way I can help people, and I think it's hard for me to look. I mean, hopefully that's not far away. But to tell you the truth, yesterday seems like a long time ago, and tomorrow seems like a long. It's far away from me. That's kind of my perception of time since I've been released.
Yeah, I understand you. You don't see it in the near future.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for me to, I think I'm focused on being with my family as much as possible, and my wife, Aviva, and my 4 children, and my 5 grandchildren, spending time with them. They gave me so much strength when I was in captivity, and I knew that I had to survive and I had to come home to be back with them, realizing the suffering that they were going through with me being there and feeling like they're suffering much more than I am when I was there. That was something that gave me so much strength. So being with my family, doing whatever I can do to help support hostage families, and hopefully, God willing, helping to bring all of the hostages back. That's my mission in life today.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing what you've been thinking about in the last couple of days and really just what you've been going through. In a sense, for the last 21 months, differently at different stages, but we appreciate everything that you've shared with us over the last 30 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and I want to thank you for being so engaged and doing so much. I mentioned, so many people that have been doing so much since October the 7th to let people know about the reality, about the situation of the hostages. So I appreciate that very much.
It's a mission for a lot of us, I think, in different ways. So we all hold it with us. And in a sense, I think it keeps us going because we all have that same light at the end of the tunnel that we're hoping for. So we all want the same end results. 50 home.
Yes. 50 home and an end to the war, I would like to add.
50 home and an end to the war
Yes, that's important for me to add as well.
for us all. Okay, so I'm going to close out this Friday Focus and thank our listeners for listening to this time's Visual Friday Focus. We'll be back again tomorrow with another installment. This episode is produced by the Podwaves. We thank you. We hope the hostages are home very, very soon, and that we won't have to do these kinds of podcasts any longer. So take care and be well.